I realized the other day if I really wanted to be good and paranoid about it, what I could do is I could start up like OBS and do a concurrent recording of everything my computer hears, but I'm too lazy to do that. So if we end up losing a recording, then I guess we just lose a recording.
That's probably going to happen at some point.
Oh, you can't have a podcast without having a recording go up in smoke at least once.
That's part of any kind of content creation. It's like, it's a rite of passage, knowing when to put something in the graveyard and leave it be. Because there's always this sense of, I gotta put it out there.
Oh, I'm not even talking about something not being good. I'm talking about something just being gone. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and they always talk about, oh, yeah, we had this amazing guest on, or we had this amazing topic, but the computer ate it, and you never get to listen to it. And then it just becomes this myth in your mind, like, the best podcast just got eaten by the computer gremlins.
I definitely have some, I've had that problem, too. And in a way, that's almost a better problem to have, because if it's just gone, you don't have to make any hard decisions. It's gone.
Versus just having kind of a mediocre recording.
Right, versus like doing a 5-hour recording for YouTube and then listening to it back and you're like, it's all coming out of the right audio channel. I clicked the wrong thing. Do I put it out like that or...
I will tell you, it depends. There really is kind of a gradation to it, because I've definitely listened to some podcasts where they're like, "Hey, we did this thing live at Comic-Con, and our recording equipment, died, but somebody in the fourth row recorded it on their phones and gave it to us. So here you go." And I'm kind of like, you know what? I'd rather it had just been a myth.
Yeah, and
just let it be a legend.
That's exactly what I mean by making that hard decision. I've done that with video footage. I've done that where I'm looking at it and like, I've sunk 40 hours into this, but it's not going to happen. And the world will be a better place if it doesn't happen. It just need to go ahead and bury this one.
How often does it happen when you get like in the middle of a project? Like you had like 3 or 4 recording sessions in a long project, and then you just have one long session. You're like, "Welp, what'd I do about this?"
With Let's Plays on YouTube, usually that will occur during the test play. Usually I've done this with Minecraft 3 or 4 times over the years. I'm like, I gotta put Minecraft on YouTube. Everybody puts Minecraft on YouTube, but I'll sit down and like play Minecraft for 20, 30 hours sometimes before I reach this point where like, it's just not a good fit, and I've just reminded myself why.
I think the only way you could really put Minecraft on YouTube, plenty of people do it, but I think the only way I'd be interested in it in your channel is if you did like a run for the wool, but you'd also have to like edit it. Like you couldn't show every minute of recording. You'd have to be like, okay, now we're going to craft, I don't know, Minecraft. Now we're going to work on this generator, and just like either do some Benny Hill music or just cut to the finished product,
Right. Yeah.
I think it would require a lot of editing for your audience.
I mean, that's some stuff that I've thought about doing before, is I'm going to just record a vanilla Minecraft world and to the end of the dragon or whatever. But no, it's usually during the test play where I'll be like, okay, this isn't working. And even though I've already sunk 20 hours into this...
Wasn't there something you recorded recently and you like got like halfway through it and said, "Guys, I have to confess, I didn't do a test play." And I feel like there was something where you're like, I broke my number one rule since like I got good at this and I didn't do a test play.
Was there? I can't recall now. I can't think of anything I've done this year or even last year without having done a test play.
It might have been one of your Christmas videos. You might have gotten it. You might have like jumped head first into Super Metroid or something and been like, "Whoops, forgot how to play this."
Oh, I did Yoshi's Island for Christmas last year, and I didn't.
That might have been.
No, I didn't.
That might.
Yeah,
have
I
been
didn't do a test play of Yoshi's Island, but like, I don't know. Like that's a game you're gonna clear in 3 or 4 hours anyway if you've played it before. So.
I've never finished Yoshi's Island.
I mean, we've all got skeletons in our closet. What do you want from me?
Well, I never owned it. It wasn't a very common game to own back in the day, and I have real bad emulation ADD when it comes to like picking stuff from a list on my computer and actually completing it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've played it several times, but I have the SNES Classic now, so It's on my list of things to do because I want to beat everything on that machine and the NES Classic. I have both of them now.
It's really hard for me to think of an SNES game that is more joyful than Yoshi's Island. I don't know, it's not my favorite game, it's not the best game, it's not one that I would put on a top 10 list, but it's hard for me to think back to that era of games and think of a game that is more joyful than Yoshi's Island.
It doesn't do this from beginning to end because there's definitely some very mournful parts of it, but I think that the opening hours of Secret of Mana come really close in tone because the first time you see a rabbite and you whack it, I'm just like, that is the most satisfying thing I've ever done in a video game. Hitting this adorable little bunny blob creature and it exploding and the text on the screen actually saying rabbit got whacked. I was like, that's amazing.
It like rains down into like a pile of clattering bones, doesn't it?
No. The rabbite doesn't. The rabbite does like a sploosh kind of thing. It's kind of like explodes slime.
Okay.
Yeah, several different classes of creatures have different death animations. Like the little moblin-looking dudes definitely do like explode into a pile of bones, but even that is delightful in its own special way.
Why did we all just decide that this like Japanese obsession with committing genocide on adorable woodland creatures was okay? We've just all signed off on this.
Well, I think so. I remember watching this is going to sound like a weird segue, but trust me, it makes sense in my head. I remember watching the Pac-Man cartoon as a kid and being really worried how they were going to, like, convert... Did you ever watch this show?
I didn't even know there was a Pac-Man cartoon.
There was, and you really need to watch it only because the way that they interpret the death mechanics in Pac-Man is really interesting because when Pac-Man eats a ghost, they pop kind of like a balloon and then their eyeballs float away, which totally makes sense. When they make contact with Pac-Man, if he's not in a super form, he just kind of gets wobbly. It's like his bones all turn to jelly. He just kind of goes, and he's just like, oh, I have no energy now. And it was just bizarre. But there's something about the way that when you chomp the ghosts, and that's what they do, they call it chomping, and they bite onto him and it's like they pop like a balloon and then the little eyeballs float away. And there's just something about that in Japanese media where you kill stuff and they just explode into a pool of magic. You know, you got your fireflies in Final Fantasy X, you've got your blue sparks in your Breath of the Wild. You know, it's all very PG violence.
I'm reminded of there's an old Web 1.0 website that's actually still active, I think. I haven't checked it in a couple of years, but it's the Mega Man homepage. The Mega Man homepage is still, to this day, maintained by one woman, and she's been doing it since the 90s, since she was in college. And it still kind of has a Web 1.0 sensibility to it.
Oh, it sure does.
So you're familiar with the Mega Man homepage?
No, I just pulled it up. I've never actually seen this site before.
Back in the day, I think this is less true now, but back in the day, the homepage was known for, she wrote all this Mega Man fan fiction that you can find on her site. And she had a whole page where she, in agonizing detail, discusses how all of the game mechanics actually make sense in the lore. And when she got to the one-ups, she's like, oh, okay, so what it actually is it's a paper-thin, invisible, intangible coating over Mega Man's armor that when he takes mortal damage, it destroys the coating but automatically teleports him back to the last place he was safe.
You know what's weird? That actually makes 100% sense to me. I always interpreted Mega Man's death and then the little whoop when you come back as him just being like, oh crap, gotta get out, you know? Just like some sort of emergency override, just like saying pew pew pew, you know, and then bringing him back.
Do you find the same kind of like childish satisfaction that I find when people just really overanalyze things like that?
Oh, 100%. And I tell my wife about him and she just stares at me like, what are you talking about? Like fanon and like obsessive fan theories and stuff, I think is just fascinating. I don't necessarily believe it. Mm-hmm. But I think it's really interesting when people take this time. Like, there's this whole fan theory revolving around the fact that the same actor plays one incarnation of Doctor Who and then also appears in Harry Potter. And people really, really, really try to connect Doctor Who to Harry Potter universes. And The really stupid thing is, if you really turn off your brain, it almost makes sense, because there's an entire 2 or 3 episode arc where the doctor puts his memory in a jar. It's a watch, basically. It's literally a stopwatch. He puts his memories into a watch and assumes a different identity and just is someone else for like 3 episodes completely. And they're like, yeah, well, you know, he could go to the planet where magic exists and be this other guy for 3 episodes.
So, I mean, this has a dark side to it, too, though. Especially when you're getting into, like, the fanon stuff. I remember reading... Back in high school, I was big into fan fiction. I loved writing and reading fan fiction. And I read one fan fiction story about the Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, where Chip and Gadget were in love. And the story was, like, about... But we're different species. Are we ever going to be able to have children? And here's the explanation the story gave. Was that, yes, even though Chip is a chipmunk and Gadget is a mouse, they can actually have children because there was an episode of the cartoon where Gadget's head got transposed onto Dale's body for part of the episode. So she has chipmunk DNA.
But that would mean that she has his brother's DNA and their kids would come out messed up. Yeah?
So they thought this 80% of the way through, I guess, is...
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me it has like a tragic ending where they like raise their flowers in the attic, you know, child together.
I don't remember how it ends.
Well, I remember that always bothered me because in the Muppets Christmas Carol, Cratchit, Kermit the Frog, and his wife, Miss Piggy, have children, and the kids gathered around the table are 2 small pigs and 1 Tiny Tim Frog. And that always bothered the hell out of me, because, like, not only are they not the same species, they aren't the same, like, family. How does a frog and a pig... Why do I think this hard about these things?
You shouldn't. I'm sure if you go on to fanfiction.net, somebody's got an explanation for it.
Nope. That is a rabbit hole I do not want to go any further down.
We spent the week in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, with Peanut's family.
How many pigeons did you forge?
Not as many as you would think.
Oh, okay.
And I want to talk about some of the happenings that occurred while we were in Tennessee. But before we get to that, I actually want to talk to you about Georgia.
Oh, okay.
Because I made 2 observations during my travels through Georgia this time that I hadn't made previously. Both in just truck stops, stopping to fill up with fuel and stuff. And it's always, because I'm always traveling very late at night, I have to leave my house. I have to plan my entire trip around Tampa. Tampa is the worst part of the trip, coming and going. And I got to make sure that we don't hit rush hour traffic in Tampa. That usually means leaving here 8, 9 p.m., which usually means hitting your neck of the woods 4 in the morning.
Right.
So when I stop in the middle of the night to fill up gas, I'm usually pulling into like one of these like big Flying J style
Flying J or the
hour.
TAs. Those are my go-tos usually.
Yeah, you don't want to... Once or twice, we pulled into, like, this Deliverance-style gas station that hasn't upgraded its technology since the 50s, and it was bizarre. But I noticed something. You go into the front of the truck stop, and it's like you got all the Circle K stuff in the like, little grocery store, you know, the hot dogs, the drinks against the back wall. But off to my left, there's a row of slot machines.
Yeah. Yep. You don't have those in Florida?
No, I have never in my life seen slot machines in a truck stop or a gas station. Is this part of, like, the Georgia lottery?
No, that is part of the questionable legality. So, okay, are you familiar with pachinko in Japan?
Patchy slot, yeah.
Yeah, it's roughly the same thing. It's people play these games in these truck stops or in the gas stations, and this is just my general understanding. It's a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, not gambling situation because they're gambling for, like, prizes. But I don't know exactly how it works, but they're gambling for money, basically. Like, I know in Japan, what they do is they gamble for trinkets, and then they go around the corner to this place that trades the trinkets for money. You know, they're basically like getting poker chips. So my general understanding is there's some sort of loophole in the law or people just are blatantly abusing it, because sometimes these places do get busted if they're caught just straight up gambling. But yeah, they have like video poker or slot machines or whatever at these truck stops, and they're video entertainment only. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised they don't have that in Florida. Maybe they crack down on them in Florida, but in Georgia, it's still something that these places with questionable legality get away with quite a bit.
I actually don't know a whole lot about Florida gambling laws when it pertains to things like casinos.
Mm-hmm.
The only law I know for sure is you're not allowed to gamble across state lines, which means in Florida, and I don't know if this is nationwide or not, but in Florida, you can't, for example, buy a lottery ticket with a debit card, because your debit card has to go across state lines and talk to your bank's central whatever and come back to authorize the transaction. That breaks the law. If you're buying lottery tickets, you're doing it in cash.
Yeah, in Georgia, right now they're all cash. I think something is changing soon where you can use some credit cards, but maybe they have to be Georgia-based. I don't know exactly how that works.
I have a very short list of things that I've seen that are sadder than just the exhausted-looking woman at this slot machine she was there the whole time we were there, filling up gas and getting snacks and whatnot. We were probably only there for 10 minutes or so, but just this dead-eyed gaze, like you can tell she'd been sitting there since she got off work, and it's now 4 a.m. and it affected me.
Yeah, no, it's a sad thing when you see something like that. I've seen the people who buy like the roll of scratchers and sit on the curb outside looking for the winner too. So, and that's in my mind equally depressing. And yeah, I've never understood why one form of gambling is considered more legal than the others when they're all, unless you're playing a game of skill like poker where you're actually beating other people. I think it's total garbage that some state sanctioned gambling is allowed and others is not.
I'm not sure that I'm with you on that, because I see a very clear distinction between, say, a scratchy lottery ticket versus video poker. Because video poker is going to be addictive in that, like, reptile brain kind of way. Like, the flashing lights and the loud sounds. And it's just very easy to keep putting in another quarter and hitting the button and watching it.
See, I think scratchers do the same thing. Honestly, I've watched people do the scratchers and they scratch them off as if they're playing a game. Me, when I get a scratcher, if I get one like in a stocking or something, I just scratch the whole thing off all at once. Mm-hmm. But there are people who will play, quote unquote, the scratcher. They're like, they'll look at the rules and they'll scratch the squares one at a time. I think that the scratchers do the same thing. I have less of a problem with just the general, pick 5 numbers lottery, because that's just chance. That's just putting your money in a hat, and if you win it, great. But I think that the scratchers gamify it too much. Maybe not as much as the video poker, but I actually have a big problem with scratchers, just because I've seen the people hunched over doing them.
I wonder why my brain draws the distinction between the two, because when you outline it like that, you're right. There's not really a difference, but for some reason...
I wonder if that's just a bias from you being a person who plays video games, to be completely honest.
It could be.
I think that might just be that's what your brain compartmentalizes. This is a game and this is not. But I think that the people who do the scratchers compulsively, I think it's the same damn thing as, us playing Tetris for 3 hours.
I did, for about a year or so, I worked at a gas station where I would sell the scratchy lottery tickets to people. And you're right, people will come in and put down obscene amounts of money. I had people come in on their payday as part of their payday ritual. Here's $100 in scratchy tickets.
Yeah.
And you're right, they'll sit at the thing and scratch all of them off. Maybe the distinction I'm drawing is because I've seen people play the video poker machines, slot machines and things, and it is like kind of like they're playing a game. Mm-hmm. They're interfacing with the machine, and even if you don't win, you're still kind of getting something out of it. You're still getting the interaction and the bright lights. I have never seen anybody get any kind of joy or fulfillment out of scratching off a lottery ticket.
Fair enough. I think that there are gradations of the same thing. I think that I would not exclude scratchers, but I will agree that maybe there's something more visceral about the video poker, because even me, I haven't been to casinos much, but a couple times I have gone and I played the video poker and I lost, but I still felt like I got an entertainment value out of it, versus if I had spent the same amount of money on scratchers, I would just be like, well, I just flushed a bunch of money.
Have you ever gotten a scratchy lottery ticket from an employer
No.
as like a bonus.
No.
The company that I worked for up until about 2013, every time they gave cards out to people, like birthday cards or Christmas cards, there was always a scratchy lottery ticket inside, and it always just upset me. And I would always get mine after everybody else in the office is gone. I worked the night shift, and I would just take it over. I would just throw it in our big paper shredder. I wouldn't even scratch it.
Okay, see, I would have at least scratched it. Because they could have been giving you free money. I mean, granted, yes, 99 times out of 100, it's like, oh, great, you gave me nothing.
For me, it was like the principle of the thing. It's like, you're my employer. You're not you shouldn't be giving me free money, first of all. You should be giving me money in exchange for the services I provide you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you appreciate the services that I provide you, the card is very nice. Thank you for giving me the card. And if you want to give me money, I will accept it as a bonus. But there's just something so tacky and insulting about the little lottery ticket.
Oh, I'm with you 100%. I would still scratch it, though. They may have given you a winner. You never know. I've won some stuff on scratchers before. My parents would always give the kids scratchers. I mean, not always, but for many years when we were like teenagers, we'd get like 5 scratchers or something in our stocking just as something to do. And I don't think any of us ever won any significant money off of it. And it's not like we were poor and all we got were lottery tickets for Christmas or anything, but it was just something that would be in our stocking. Like, here, have some scratch off lotto tickets.
When we were not very young, I was probably 10 and my brother was 9 or so, but my parents would leave us home alone for the weekends. My stepdad played music on the beach and my mom would go out to his shows. So, like Friday night after we got home from school and we did our homework and everything, what she would do is she would walk down to the gas station with us and, buy us snacks and soda and whatever we were going to need for the weekend before she went out. And one week she was like, telling us like how broke she was. She's like, I've got $2. That's it. That's all we have. That's enough for like a bottle of Pepsi. That's all you can get. And we begged her to buy the $2 lottery ticket because it had the Monopoly guy on it. And so she bought it with the $2 and she let us scratch it. And we turned that ticket into $15 worth of snacks.
Nice.
So I made another observation about Georgia truck stops.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know if this is a universal Georgia thing or if I just happen to stop in the 3 places in the state that do this. But you go to the back wall with all the drinks, and the Cokes are always in the middle of the case at eye level. The Pepsis are always down at ankle level.
Right, because it's Georgia. No one wants that double swill. Come on, that was just a gimme.
I did feel kind of like a second-class citizen, like stooping down like a troll to get my drink from the dark bowels of the case.
Yeah, well, no, that's what they do, because if it's busy, if you're there in the middle of the day, anyone who bends down to get the Pepsi gets a swift kick in the ass.
Exactly.
Like, that's what it's down there for. My thing at truck stops is it's always seems absurdly difficult to find like a Powerade or something. I'm always like, okay, I don't want bottled water, I don't want soda, I don't want a frickin' Red Bull, and I don't want beer. Where is like a sports drink at? Where is something I can drink that's got some flavor but isn't going to jack me up?
Yeah, soda's not great on the long trips because any drink you're going to buy for a long trip is going to get warm over the course of your trip.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, my go-to is I like the Arizona tea. They serve it in the tall boys. You don't have to worry about the caps. And then, like, lukewarm iced tea is still pretty good. I mean, you can drink it.
Well, the good thing about tea is if you get, like, a big, tall iced tea with ice in it, unlike soda, which turns into, like, tepid sugar water, tea, I feel like, as the ice melts into it, it becomes weaker tea, which isn't as good, but it's still drinkable. I usually just get coffee, honestly, because even when that cools, I don't know, it eventually gets to a point where you don't want to drink it, but even as that cools, it's not too bad. My problem is I have like a tiny little girl bladder, so anything I drink that's going to be at all a diuretic, whether if it's got any kind of caffeine or anything to it, it's just like, well, that's going to cut about 15 minutes more into our trip because I'm going to have to stop that much sooner.
I don't mind stopping. I don't really understand this obsession with like making good time on the road.
Well, yes and no. It's not a huge priority to me, but I do like to make decent time just because I'm one of those people who I'm a bad passenger. I like to drive when I'm in the car, and me being the one who does like 99% of the driving. It's just like, okay, I don't mind doing the driving, but I want to do as little of it as possible. And also having a toddler now kind of changes everything, because the last few times we took a road trip, we left at his bedtime with the hope that he would sleep the whole time. And about 50-50 on that. One time he stayed up pretty much all night. He was in a pretty good mood. He just wouldn't sleep. He kept like pointing out stuff like the moon over and over again.
No, it's the same moon.
Yeah.
It's not a different one.
But then other times he'll just conk right out. Then we hit like the mother of all fog. So I was like, great, the baby's fast asleep. We're making good time. And then we got to Georgia and it was just like soup. Like, it was the worst fog I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, what in the hell is going on? I felt like I was in a Stephen King novel.
So we were in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee with Peanut's family, and this is the Dolly Parton capital of the world. As far as I can tell, Dolly Parton owns the entire county.
I could believe that.
What was interesting for me and Peanut is because all of her family came down from Ohio. They live outside of Canton. And the area where most of them live, it's just like a generic kind of nothing special America. A little bit of suburbia, you drive a half hour, you get to the local big city. Anything you want is there. It's a nice, just comfortable, low-stress place to live. Peanut and I live in the tourist trap. We live 5 minutes away from St. Pete Beach, Florida.
Right.
So for them, they all drove 8 hours or whatever it was to get to like a really fun vacation destination, whereas Peanut and I drove north for 12 hours just to get back where we started.
Right.
That's how it kind of felt to the two of us. I described it to the clerk at the honey store. There's a honey store.
Oh, there's an everything store, I'm sure.
Yeah, so he asked like how we felt about Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And I'm like, well, it's the second most Orlando place I've ever been to. Was how I described it.
So my in-laws actually have a place in Gatlinburg, and we were there not terribly long ago. So I'm very familiar with Gatlinburg. We have not made it to Pigeon Forge yet, though. They keep wanting us to go up there with them, but just the timing has not worked out. Gatlinburg is like the perfect encapsulation of one of those places that's fun to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there because it's just all tourist stuff. I mean, the mountains are pretty, but I'm sure there's places I could live in Tennessee and have the mountains and not have Gatlinburg, like Chattanooga, which is every bit as pretty, but not nearly as tourist trappy.
You say it's a nice place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there, but like, I already live there. That's where I am.
Right. Right, exactly. You live in like essentially the same kind of tourist trap. Now yours is beach versus mountain, but you probably have the same damn, Ripley's Museum and Salt and Pepper Shaker Museum and whatever else they've got there.
Kind of. And I'll explain what I mean by kind of. Because like the big tourist trap in Florida is Orlando. That's 2 hours away from me.
Right.
Where I live on the Gulf beaches, it's kind of like an Orlando Junior, maybe? What's preventing it from blowing up into the big, like, Ripley's climbing wall emporium and or go-kart fishery or whatever is just physical space. There's just not enough physical space along the beach for you to have all the restaurants and all the condos and all the bars and all the touristy shops along with the Ripleys and stuff. So the Ripleys and stuff, not really in my area, but everything else to a T.
How many specialty pancake places did you make it to in Gatlinburg? Because there's like 19 of them that I saw.
I would expect going really anywhere on vacation, anywhere along any interstate in the United States, I would expect a lot of pancake shops, okay? I was blown away by how many pancake places had the word pancake in the title. It was astounding.
I don't know if it's like the home of it, but there's a I know you can get a lot of like iron skillets and stuff up there. Like I think Lodge Iron is either from there or has an outlet there or something. So a lot of them will be like skillet pancake, this, that, and the other.
You could drive from our cabin down to the main drag, the main strip. Right there at that traffic light is a Cracker Barrel. You could make a right turn out of that Cracker Barrel parking lot and in 5 minutes later arrive at The other Cracker Barrel, having driven past 6 or 7 pancake restaurants in the interim.
I think part of the reason, too, is when you're going to a mountainous sort of vacation destination, I think your typical day is wake up, eat a big hearty breakfast, and then go hiking before it gets too hot, and then coming back and either sleeping away the afternoon or going and drinking moonshine or something. I don't know. I sampled moonshine when I was in Gatlinburg, which was an experience. I actually sampled moonshine, and I am 90% sure I was standing next to a young man on rumschpringe. Are you familiar with rumschpringe?
That is a word I have never heard before in my life.
You would love it. Rumspringa is what they call it when the Amish, and I believe the Mennonites also practice it. It's when the Amish children are allowed to go English. Basically, what we consider Western society, what we consider normal society, they say going English. So they're allowed to smoke and drink and have electronics and have sex and do basically whatever they want. It's basically like spring break, except they can do it for many, many years, because their idea is they want people who want to be in the church. And a surprising number of these kids will eventually go back. They'll go, they'll sow their wild oats, and then they'll decide they want to settle down. They want to be with their family. A lot of them meet a nice person of the church, from their community, because even though they're on Rumspringa, they still hang out with a lot of the same kids, and they'll decide to go back. So this was a guy who was wearing relatively traditional looking clothing. He was standing next to a girl in very traditional clothing, like the head covering and everything. And like the person taking his ID actually had to call over their manager because they didn't have a laminated ID. They had like some sort of printed out paper thing from their community. And I really wish I had asked him about it, but I kind of was like, is this rude? Is it neat if I'm in on it? Like, I really just want to look at him and kind of raise one eyebrow and go, Rumspringa? And see what he said.
Give him like the finger guns.
Yeah, like, pew, Rumspringa. There's a documentary called The Devil's Playground, I think is what it's called. Yeah, and it's a documentary of kids on Rumspringa. From like 2002 or something. It's really interesting. But anyways, I sampled moonshine. You think of moonshine as being like, oh my God, it's going to kill you, liquor. And really 90% of what they've got at this place now is basically liqueur. It's all sweet.
I think my mother-in-law did a moonshine tasting while all the kids were playing somewhere else.
So I did a moonshine tasting and I did a flavored whiskey tasting. And the way they do this is really ingenious. They charge you $5 to do the tasting, but then they give you a $5 coupon. So really what you're doing is you're investing $5 into your eventual purchase. Of course, every bottle in there costs like $25.
Of course.
So you're not really... But no, they got us good. We bought quite a bit of booze while we were in Gatlinburg. It was quite fun.
Okay, so you're familiar with some of the Gatlinburg attractions, then?
I'm familiar with some of the trappings. Yeah, but I haven't done everything there because we've done a lot of like nature stuff when we've been there.
So the coolest thing that we did while we were there was called Anarchista. You're on the main drag and you just see these chairlifts just going up this mountain, and we're like, okay, what's that? And we go over, and what it is, you pay $20 a head, and you ride their chairlift up to the top of the mountain. And when you get up on top of the mountain, it's like a little tiny amusement park, just with some mountain trappings. There's a nature walk, there's some restaurants and souvenir shops, and just some fun stuff. But you're kind of, because there's that $20 cover charge, I guess we'll call it, you're not like crowded in like you are down in the street. It's a little quieter, and... the cool thing is, this was right in the area of the Smoky Mountains where in 2016 there was all those big fires burned through.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, very familiar with that.
We paid our $20 and rode up to the top of, I guess it's Anarchista Mountain. I don't really know where the word Anarchista comes from, but rode the chairlift up, and part of their little nature trail that they had overlooked the valley that got burned out, and it's still all black and dead down there. And it looked really cool, and there was just the fascinating story of this fire and how it was fought.
Oh yeah, no, that was a big deal. My in-laws' condo actually is kind of now off on its own because everything around it burned.
Mm-hmm.
It's surrounded by empty foundations or new constructions where things have been rebuilt. Theirs had fairly recently been redone with some like fire retardant stucco or something, and they think that might have been like the reason it didn't burn, because it was surrounded by all these old lodge type places, you know?
It sounds weird to say it, but that was probably the most beautiful scenic view that we got the whole time we were there, was looking down over just where this nature's carnage had come through, and now it's just now starting to kind of come back to life.
I could see that. I mean, fire is terrible because it interferes with people, but it really is natural. And part of the reason why we have such bad wildfires is we're so good at preventing the small ones. So when you finally get a good cleansing burn, it's really bad.
Isn't California burning down again right now? Aren't there big fires out west at the moment?
As far as I know, California's been on fire in some form or fashion for the last 20 years. I mean, I don't know.
It's funny, is I got a friend out in California who likes to pick on me this time every year when hurricane season's rolling in. And he's like, let me know if your house is still standing. And I'm like, sure, let me know if yours burns down.
I gotta tell you, that's the one thing, because I lived in Florida for a couple of years, and I know people who live in California, and I know people who live up in the Northeast where they get nor'easters and crap, and I'm like, you know what? Georgia, for all of its flaws, is pretty temperate. Mm-hmm. We don't get hit by, like, we occasionally get tornadoes, but nothing like you get out in the plains. I mean, because we're pretty hilly where we're at. Georgia doesn't get a whole lot of terrible wrath of God stuff like you get in other places.
One observation I made while I was in Gatlinburg, and this is going to be really meandering, and I don't actually know the story behind it, but because I am an uneducated and ignorant, just general American person, most of what I know about states that I've never been to are just pure stereotypes. Okay?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you do.
Until I got to know you and your wife, like, I had this conception of Georgia in my head that was just banjo plucking, roadkill eating, just backwater redneck USA. And then, of course, it's not like that.
Well, to be fair, there's a lot of that in Georgia. I actually worked at an amusement park in Georgia for a long time, and people from out of state would say, you don't sound like you're from Georgia. And I'm like, well, there's the Atlanta area, and then there's kind of the rest of Georgia.
Well, that's true of Florida as well, because there are a lot of Florida is like that too, but I grew up in a part of Florida that's not like that. So in my head, I don't even think of Florida as being the South, whereas I've always thought of Georgia as being like the deep South.
My theory has always been that there's a weird spatial warp at the Georgia-Florida line, and as soon as you enter Florida, you start somehow traveling further north. Because north-ass Florida is basically South Georgia.
Yeah, very,
there's no difference.
Very correct. I mention this because my conception of Tennessee, I have this just stereotype of this just Confederate flag waving, South will rise again, Dolly Parton rodeo kind of state. And so I'm like mentally preparing myself for the trip. Am I really going to enjoy going to Tennessee? And so first of all, it's not entirely like that, of course. It's a tourist trap. They're trying to make themselves presentable for the rest of the country, I guess. But it was a very enjoyable trip. Except I saw in one of the shop windows the worst t-shirt I've ever seen in my life. And I know it's the worst t-shirt because I tapped my wife on the shoulder and I pointed to it. And she agreed with me, yeah, this is the worst t-shirt we've ever seen.
Oh, God, I wonder if it's the same t-shirt I saw, because I saw some bad t-shirts. Okay, what did you see?
It's a t-shirt. It had a Confederate flag on it. So, and right there, some people are listening. They're already going to the comments like, yeah, that's the worst t-shirt. Like, I don't have a problem conceptually with putting a Confederate flag on a t-shirt. I realize that symbols are very personal to people. What the flag means to one person isn't what it means to another person, and far be it for me to tell you what it's supposed to mean to you. So if it was just a flag on a shirt, I'd be like, okay, I'm not wearing that shirt, and I probably wouldn't want to like publicly hang out with somebody who's wearing the flag on the shirt, but it's not the worst yet.
I've seen way worse than that already.
Here's what makes this shirt the worst, is it had a slogan written on it under this Confederate flag that says, "Never apologize for being right."
Oh, God. No, that is the worst t-shirt ever
Right?
made.
Because you think about the Confederate flag and what it symbolizes, and depending on who you ask, you're going to get different answers. Like, I think the most common answer you're going to get is that it symbolizes the Confederacy and slavery. But then that gradient goes all the way down to, I like Dukes of Hazzard. But when you put those words on the shirt, you're very clearly saying...
Now, did you see that in Gatlinburg proper? Because Gatlinburg is more, I wouldn't say progressive, but definitely more free-spirited, I felt like, than some of the other parts of Tennessee.
This was in one of the tourist shops on the strip in between the Cracker Barrel and the other Cracker Barrel, on full display in front of God and everybody.
I say that because I saw the shirt that made me laugh out loud and poke my wife. It was just text on a shirt, but it said, "I'm not gay, but $10 is $10."
See, I just think that's funny. Like, I know it's offensive, I know it's horrible, but
no, I actually thought it was kind of funny too, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's hilarious!" And I was shocked to see that in a shop that was close to Confederate flags and stuff, but more benign Confederate flags, right.
But when you use the phrase, like, never apologize for being right, and you put it on a shirt with the battle flag of the people who lost the Civil War...
Never apologize for being right is just a douchey thing to say in any context. Like, if that was a picture of Albert Einstein and it said never apologize for being right, I would still think it's kind of a douchey shirt. But then you put it with literal traitors who lost a war.
That's the point that I really like to emphasize whenever I talk about the Civil War. They lost. I understand Southern pride. I understand taking pride in the place where you live. And I understand there's a rich cultural heritage that is very separate from other regions of the U.S. But why would you root for the losers? If it was like a Cleveland Browns helmet with the same slogan, it would be just as bad. It wouldn't be just as bad, obviously.
I don't know. The Browns are pretty bad. Wow. I was not expecting the sports zingers on this podcast today.
I don't know where that came from. I know where that came from. I just spent a week locked in a cabin with a bunch of Browns fans. Like, that's where that came from.
Oh, there you go. One of my favorite bands is this rock band called Drive-By Truckers. Are you familiar with them?
I'm not, no.
Drive-By Truckers, they're an Alabama band, and their influences are like Lynyrd Skynyrd and punk rock. They are hard Southern rock, but they're also politically very more on the progressive side of things. They're not afraid to get political, but they're also very Southern. They do this one album called Southern Rock Opera. It's a 2-disc album, and it's basically all about being conflicted about being Southern. And he has this kind of running theme. There's one song that's just called The Duality of the Southern Thing, which is basically having Southern pride, but also having guilt about Southern pride at the same time. And it's, as a person who grew up as a progressive Southerner, I mean, I've lived in Georgia basically my entire life, it's a really great album to listen to, and they're a really great band, and I think you would appreciate it if you can get past the twang. But they're not that twangy. They're Southern rock. They sound more like Allman Brothers and Lynyrd Skynyrd than...
Yeah, see, I don't like the twang, but I'm down with some Allman Brothers and Lynyrd Skynyrd. I can deal with Skynyrd. I picked out Skynyrd for my wedding, so...
Yeah. So if you ever get a chance, listen to some Drive-By Truckers, because I think, especially after your Pigeon Forge experience, maybe you'll be down with some of their lyricisms.
So the shirt was bad.
Oh yeah, no, that shirt is bad.
But then it got worse, because we're walking around Gatlinburg, and we notice we keep walking past the old-timey photo. You go in, you get your picture taken, they print it out on like tea-stained paper, sepia tone, and you've got like cowboy hats and stuff on. There were a million of these. They were on every block. You went into the mall, it's in the mall. It's everywhere. You could stand at one old-timey photo and look across the street and see 2 more on either side of you. There's no way the booming economy of Gatlinburg can support this many old-timey photos in this small of a span. It's just not possible. So my thought is, how are all of these places open? And they must like all be owned by the same company. And then I started thinking, well, probably then it's all owned by one company. Like all of these little shops, except for the Subway and the Baskin Robbins and whatever. It's probably just all owned by, like, I don't know, Dolly Parton Incorporated or whatever. And when I made this realization, which again, I don't know whether or not it's true, it's just the observation that I made, that made the shirt so much worse. Because now it's kind of a corporate image of Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Like the city council or whoever greenlit this company to buy up all these businesses on the main strip. Yeah, we're going to sell this shirt. Like it's got the Gatlinburg seal of approval. It's not just one backwards guy with a terrible shop. That made it so much worse for me.
So I don't know if I don't think one company owns all of the shops, but I do know that some companies own multiple places, because you'll see basically identical shops on either side of the street. And I know I went to a moonshine tasting, and when I was at the moonshine tasting, they had a whiskey, and they said, if you like that, you should go do a whiskey tasting. So we went down the road and went to the whiskey tasting, and it was it was owned by the same people. They had overlap of, Smoky Mountains Moonshine or whatever was the name of it. And I know that there's like 2 or 3 different Ripley's, products there, and you can see some of the same branding. Now, I don't know that questionable t-shirt dude was related at all to the other slightly more progressive t-shirt dude, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Right. So I'm hoping that I'm wrong about this. I'm hoping it is just one guy with a terrible t-shirt shop. I did have a mostly positive experience because I went into it with my stereotype in my head, expecting just this wall of just Southern racism. And that was like the only actually overtly racist thing I saw for sale in the tourist trap in Gatlinburg.
Right, because they're trying to sell a Southern image without selling racism to racists, because that's clearly not going to get the tourist dollar in there. You're not going to have a bunch of people show up to Gatlinburg if they think it's going to be unwelcoming. That said, it is a pretty white town.
It is. It's a very white bread part of the U.S., but I think it's, as a vacation destination, I think it's a regional destination. People aren't flying in from New York and Seattle to visit beautiful Gatlinburg. They should. It's a lot of fun, but they're all going to Orlando instead, and then when they turn 65, they're retiring in Clearwater Beach.
If someone has an urge to go to the mountains, the Great Smoky Mountains are really pretty, and I do like them a lot, and I want to spend more time up there, especially as long as I don't know how long my in-laws are going to keep that place. They have a rental property they can get, when it's not being rented out. And I'd like to go up there more, especially as the boy gets a little older and can actually do more walking trails. I have to tell you what we did when we were in Gatlinburg, because it is the most southern-ass thing that I think anyone has ever done. And I know this because my father-in-law, my wife's stepfather, who is, I don't think he would be offended if he said he was pretty country, was saying this is about the most southern thing I've ever heard of. We went to a firefly show. And you're probably wondering how you do a firefly show. And we were too. Like, we had honestly no idea. Like, do we sit in like stands and like they play music or something? It's not nearly that sophisticated, but it's still pretty cool. There are apparently species of fireflies that are called synchronous. So instead of flashing independently, they all flash basically together. Now, they don't flash at literally the same time, but they flash sort of like in bursts. So you'll see them kind of ripple around. And the reason they do that is apparently fireflies will get competitive with each other. So they'll try to mimic each other's flashes. So certain species of firefly will all flash at the same time. They've got some sort of internal clock to do it. And it just so happens that on this like little mountaintop in Gatlinburg, there is an area where they congregate in the thousands. And so we went up there one night, and it's not even like a field, it's like a walking path. They have
what time of year is this?
This was earlier in the month, so it's like early summer when we were doing this. It was warm, but not like super uncomfortably warm. In fact, the dew started to fall and it got a little cool by the end of the night. But so we would go out there at like 7, because it takes a long time for them to like take the shuttles up the mountain, and we had to get there kind of early because you have to like get on a waiting list for this thing. Like it's apparently a pretty big deal, and Michelle's mom was like waiting for this for forever. So we go up there and we're waiting around, and they have like regular lightning bugs, and the regular lightning bugs are cool. But then these things start flashing, and the only way I can describe it is, do you know when you're on like a plane, when you're seeing the runway approach from the air when they have the lights on, you know, and they've got that like, effect when it's just going down. It was like that on either side of this walking path, just these bursts of light just flashing and going down the path, and just these rhythms. They would do like 4 or 5 at a time and then pause, and then like 30 seconds later would just do it again. And it was really cool. I don't know if it was quite worth the effort because they apparently had like applied for the lottery for 10 years or something before they finally got it. And then we had to take a shuttle and like deal with the screaming toddler. He fell asleep before the real lightning bug started, which was hilarious to me. He spent the entire rest of the time looking for bugs, which meant us walking up and down the path looking for fireflies. But man, it was a trip. It was so southern.
That does sound like the most southern ass thing I've heard of. Yes, that's pretty amazing.
Apparently, these synchronous fireflies do like happen just in random places, but for whatever reason, they like this one particular spot because they've got like the right soil or an air temperature and everything.
Who knows how the mind of a firefly works?
I've heard tell that all birds are edible. That is an expression I have heard, and I believe it. I think that you could deep fry a penguin if someone lets you, and it would probably be really tasty.
There's going to come a day in, I'm going to say the very near future, because the technology is already here. We just have to like market it and mass produce it. But you're going to be able to just print proteins together in a steak. You're going to have synthetic meat. There's going to be a website that's going to pop up where you can go on and get you a pound of leopard and a pound of penguin.
Here's my question, though. So I know that synthetic meat is a thing that exists. That exists now. You can't go out and buy it. But can they really emulate specific animals?
I don't see why not. I've seen Jurassic Park. You just need to get their DNA and then...
How many leopards do you have to kill before you figure out what a perfect leopard steak tastes like?
I think with something like leopard, you wouldn't have to kill any. Because as soon as you put the product on the website, whoever gets to that website up first is going to be the authority in what exotic meat tastes like. Who's going to question them?
Apparently there's a big kerfuffle right now because there are synthetic gemstones. So people kind of get their panties in a twist because they're like, is this a real diamond or is this a lab-created diamond? To which I say they're both real diamonds. It doesn't frickin' matter. And one didn't have to be mined out by, starving kids in Africa. So I'll take the lab-created one, thank you.
I'm with you on that. I mean, cubic zirconia is good enough for me.
Well, no, I mean, they can make, like, for real by God diamonds in a lab. Chemically perfect diamonds. But people are like, well, does it count? And I'm like, yeah, it counts, So I can see there being a point where there's like, we're getting X percentage of our meat synthetically, and people are like, no, I want a real cow. I don't care if it tastes different. I want a real cow.
No, for sure. Those people will always exist. And I think there's always going to be some prestige to that. You can see that right now with chocolate. All chocolate is basically made the same way, but some chocolates are marketed as like super expensive gourmet chocolates. They're probably technically, like, objectively better than a Hershey bar. If you're a chocolate scientist, you can go in, but they're not $800 better than a Hershey bar. You know what I mean?
I think you're overestimating the chocolate market.
Am I?
Yeah, you totally are, because I can tell you that a $6 Godiva bar is better than a $1 Hershey bar, and I would take the $6 Godiva bar if given the choice. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to turn my nose up at some free Hershey's.
You know what, man? I'm going to disagree with you on that. I think the $6 Godiva bar is pretentious, and give me the Hershey. I'll take the Hershey or a Mr. Good bar any day.
I'm going to have to hard disagree with you on this one, because I'm a man who likes him some gourmet chocolate. And I'm not talking about $800 chocolate. Yeah, it's some Lindt truffles or some Godiva. Even the Hershey Special Dark. I'm a much bigger fan of that than the generic Hershey's. So I like the special dark variety where you get like the special dark like crackle. That's really good.
The day will come when all the meat at like your supermarket is going to be synthetic. It's all going to be made in the lab in the back of the store or whatever and shipped out. So it's going to be the same boneless hormone-filled chicken breast you're eating right now. It's just it'll come out of a 3D printer instead of an actual chicken. But there will always be the market of guys who are like, you know what, I want me a chicken. And I think it's going to be a prestige thing, kind of the way that like classic cars are today. There's always going to be people who want like the classic Chevy rather than whatever the new car is.
I'm going to make a different analogy for you. I think it's going to be more like having a cotton t-shirt versus a polyester t-shirt. I think that there will be a parallel market, but I don't think it's going to be as diverged as, you know, a 67 Chevy versus a Prius. I think it's going to be maybe more of a matter of taste. And I see this right now between the people who eat the boneless, skinless chicken breast and the people who are making like whole beer can chicken on their grill, you know, and smoking it for hours. The people between, you know, making hamburger helper and then people like my dad who are like doing standing rib racks and their big green eggs. I think that you already see this to a certain degree with food. I think there's already a big stratification, and I think that it's just going to continue. But I don't think it's going to be quite so night and day.
Here's what I think is going to happen. And I believe this is going to happen. There's going to come a point where when the synthetic meats have been ubiquitous for all this time, that people are going to take a hard look and be like, why are we killing animals for meat when we're getting this identical product from the lab? Like we already make everything in a lab, all of our phones and our plastics and everything we in our life. And I think there's going to eventually be legislation that will come down and slowly phase out the big cattle farms and the big chicken farms, and it's going to be taboo to eat real meat. It's going to be kind of like how the extreme vegan crowd views it today is going to be the mainstream outlook on eating meat. So I think we're going to reach a point where like there's going to be the last few holdouts, like 3 or 4 farms, cattle ranches in America that still have their grandfathered in permit to slaughter X amount of cows per year for this $600 a pound market. I think we're going to see that in 100 years or so.
I wouldn't say it'd be that soon. Maybe in the 200-year range. Maybe we're like colonizing, you know, Mars or something, and people on Mars have never had a live cow, which I think is completely within the realm of possibility. I think that, you know, you can eventually have your moon colony and your Mars colony, and they're growing all of their meat, you know, all their protein products synthetically. Maybe at that point, but I think within our lifetime, you're still going to have your chicken and your hamburgers. You may see the prices rise, but I think the prices would rise to about the point that you see it like a farmer's market, because I think that's what it's going to be. One of my best friends is actually a butcher, so he would be horrified by all of this conversation because he is one of those people who likes the art and the craft of carving meat and picking pieces and stuff like that.
Well, and that's the difference between having an appreciation for the art and the craft of it versus it just being part of your life. And that's why I brought up like the 67 Chevy, because I have a car because I need to drive to the grocery store and back. But I don't actually care about cars or who builds them or where they came from or the history of any of I don't care about any of that. Whereas my next door neighbor has 5 cars that he's always working on, and they're his babies and he loves them.
No, I totally get that. While we're having this conversation, I'm also looking over at my games shelf, and I know that there's no reason for me to have all these hunks of plastic when all of this information exists on the internet already, but yet I still keep buying these hunks of plastic because I enjoy putting them on my shelf.
This is going to be the great, like, you always look back in time at what people were like, even just 100 years ago, appalled at their behavior. How could anybody live that way? Thank goodness we live in such progressive and enlightened times. But 100 years from now, people are going to look back at like, oh my God, I found this picture of this Brickroad guy. He has a picture of this just shelf just full of plastic games, and he's eating a steak? He's history's greatest monster. He's why the penguins are extinct.
But God bless the person who scripted their DNA, because they are delicious.
So, I'm going to take this one step further. Like, last time I brought this up, when I was talking to my friends at D&D, and they all thought it was a step too far. But I think it's going to happen. So, the guy's going to put up the website. You can buy a pound of leopard, pound of penguin. For $69, we will mail you a little kit where you prick your finger and send us a sample of your blood. And then a month after that, we'll send you a pound of you. We will clone some McClain muscle that you can now throw in a pan. Step too far? That's
that's too far for a number of reasons, even beyond the obvious just factor. That's how you get mad cow disease, yo. Like, introducing your own DNA to yourself gastronomically is how you end up with, like, brain problems.
I'm assuming they solved that problem. I'm assuming that something science magic bibbity bobbity boo, they've solved that problem. That's not going to happen.
So you're saying we can have straight up cannibalism, auto cannibalism,
synthetic cannibalism. Yeah, you can have USDA approved slab of Brickroad.
I don't think you're going to have... That's not going to be mainstream. You know, you're not going to be, like, showing up to dinner parties where they're, like, serving their...
Oh, no, absolutely not.
But you're going to have some eyes wide shut where people are doing that all the time.
Right. It's going to be the bizarre, like, weird dark corners of the internet. Like,
that's going to be the hashtag spirit cooking, except it'll be real.
It's going to be like the 10-pound gummy bear. Like, only the most disgusting human beings will buy the 10-pound gummy bear. But every single person who buys the 10-pound gummy bear makes a YouTube video of themselves consuming part of it. Tell me how your fiesta is going so far.
Well, I kind of stalled out because GDQ was going on, so I was kind of like, I could fiesta more or I could watch GDQ, and then I had kind of a hell of a week. So I got my first 3 jobs, and I'm playing just regular, and I got Black Mage. I rolled Berserker originally, and I said, I don't want to do that my first time out, so I re-rolled that one. I paid for the re-roll, and I got Mystic Knight, and I got Geomancer. So I have a potent party that will have some trouble situationally, but, like, so far, first world, no problem. I was watching some of your plays and some other people playing where they were having a lot of trouble with, like, Liquid Flame or Biblios or something, and no problem, just tearing them alive with magic. I had the Black Mages throwing out magic. I have the Mystic Knights doing sword damage that can be spelled also. And then once I got Geomancer, I got my Geomancer set up so that when he's not doing terrain stuff, he's just throwing out black magic because they have pretty decent magic stat anyhow.
Someone who knows the game pretty well, you're not even going to have trouble situationally, I don't think.
The Black Mages, right before I picked up the Mystic Knights, I was kind of like, man, I really hope I get a martial character. And then I rolled Berserker, which is kind of like the cosmic joke.
You're like, that's not what I meant.
Bad game. So it kind of doesn't matter what my 4th job is. I don't know that I'm going to have anything that's going to have great synergy, but just having something that's going to punch pretty hard is going to help. Yeah, Chemist would maybe be the hardest, just as a first-time player, but, I mean, I know you just use hero drinks, and then you're pretty good. But yeah, I mean, whether I get Samurai or Dragoon, I forget what else comes on that last
Dancer
crystal.
Is the last job on that crystal.
Now, Dancer, I understand, I think Spellblade synergizes with Dance?
It does, because what you can do is give Dance to your Mystic Knight, and then Sword Dance his magic attacks. For kind of insane damage.
I think, strictly speaking, Dancer would probably be the most obviously good one, but I think any of them would be good. So I need to get back to that. I'll probably do that sometime this week. I just, honestly, because I wasn't really talking to NPCs and I don't know the game that well, I kind of got lost. Because I got to the point where they, where you get the boat and you sail out to Crescent and then your boat immediately gets taken away because that's Final Fantasy V. They give you a vehicle and then immediately take it away from you. And then I got on the Black Chocobo and I was like, where now? So I got to go back and do the desert next, like the sandworm. I think is the next thing I have to do.
Yeah, you'll go back and talk to Sid at the library, and that's your next plot trigger.
See, I didn't know that plot trigger, so I'm like just flying around aimlessly with this thing, and I found the town where what's his name, Lightning Summon dude is hanging out, and I was like, well, I don't have a summoner, so nuts to that. and that's why I called it a day.
I can't imagine you've hit any like roadblocks.
Oh God, no. The only problem I've had is healing. Because I'm a novice player, so I'm kind of throwing potions around like candy, and so I'm kind of running into like money issues because not buying swords for my knights and then having enough money for some potions. But and also I was a little bit hard-headed about beating, I guess, Liquid Flame. I think, yeah, Liquid Flame. I mean, I could have just broken my rod and ended it immediately, but I was like, no, I'm going to try to do this without breaking my rod. And I used basically all my potions, keeping my guys up while throwing out ice at him. But other than that, it's been pretty smooth sailing.
I mentioned a short story in the first or second episode we did about Enoch Soames.
I bookmarked it and have not gotten back to it.
I finally got around to reading the short story that week, and it's been on my little list of topics here ever since. But so what the story is about, I'm going to go ahead and spoil it.
That's fine.
Statute of Limitations is on a 200-year-old story. But it takes place in, I think, the 1870s or 1880s or so. And it's about a writer who's not being appreciated in his own time, but he thinks he's a genius. He thinks he's going to be the guy. So he makes a deal with actual, literal Satan, who's going to send him 100 years in the future to the year 1995 or 96 for 1 hour to sit in the English Museum of Literature so he can see how he's appreciated after his death. The rub, of course, being that he's not. He just dies poor and alone and nobody knows who he is. And then the devil gets his soul, something about a gold fiddle.
Yeah.
I'm going to paste this text to you from the short story, and I'm going to give you a little bit of context first.
Okay.
Because he only finds one reference to himself in this wild, futuristic world of 1996, where in this futuristic world, it's kind of a dystopian thing where fiction is not as appreciated anymore. And the English language has become so bastardized that they only write the language phonetically now.
Okay.
I think what the original author was going for is, there's Shakespearean English and there's modern English. So in the 1990s, English is going to look like some new thing again, which is kind of true. I mean, this is...
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like text message language, you get a little bit of that.
But this is what he came up with. This is the 1880s version of this is what phonetic English is going to look like in the 1990s.
Oh my God. Okay, I'm going to attempt to read this out loud real quick. For example, a writer of the time named Max Beerbohm, who was still alive in the 20th century, wrote a story in which he portrayed, I guess, an imaginary character called Enoch Soames, a third-rate poet who believes himself a great genius and makes a bargain with the devil in order to know what posterity thinks of him. It has, when you start reading it, when you start getting into the flow of it, it very much reads like when you read something that has been, the word is escaping me, but Mark Twain did this a lot with like Huck Finn. Like, he wrote a lot of things in the dialect. There's a word for writing in the dialect that I think that's bothering me. But it's one of those things where you do almost have to read it out loud, to get the feeling of it. This is wild though, because there's literally no standardization. This is literally just a collection of syllables that don't seem to have any real regularity to it.
I mean, my thought when I was reading the story was, this is not how I would phonetically spell any of these words.
No, but at the same time, this kind of has like an almost Germanic kind of character to it. Like the hard K's and the... Like he says called, but it's spelled Kauld.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can definitely kind of see where he's getting this enunciation from. Wow.
The word century that he spells Senchri, It feels like the author back in the 1890s was like, okay, I'm going to take for granted that the people in the 1990s are going to be uneducated and terrible at communicating. How can I portray that in my story? So I thought it was a fun little story, but this one aspect of it did not age well for me.
No. For one thing, there's a lot here where he is actually adding letters. It's weird because it's inconsistent. The very first thing is he says, for example, and for is just FR, which I kind of get. For example.
Yeah.
But example has like 18 letters in it. It's EGZARMPL. There's very little consistency with where the vowel placement is, where you are using it and where you aren't, and where you're adding double letters. From what I know about how language develops, this doesn't actually make a lot of sense to me, but it is fascinating.
What we're looking at here, this is the episode of 1963 Star Trek when Captain Kirk whips out his futuristic communicator that's 10 times bigger than any cell phone we have in 2018. That's what this is.
Yeah, kind of. It's like the Jetsons, where like they're using flying cars and everything else in the world, but they still have like, they use like an entire monitor bank to do the phone call.
Because it's a time travel story, I think what we can do, we should write a sequel where we go back in time. You know, the future didn't turn out like that.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with any time travel thing where you give a date. I don't care how far along it is, you're eventually going to hit that date.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think that it's much better to do either the Star Wars treatment and be like, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, or just say, sometime in the future. You know?
The way to not do it is spell example with a G and a Z.
And like one vowel in the middle of it. Example.